So anyone who has known me for any length of time would find it laughable that I would choose to do a talk about sacrifice. It's not something that I've been known to practice a whole lot in my life. I've lived the majority of my life doing pretty much what I wanted, when I wanted, in the way that I wanted, to the best of my ability. For instance, when I first came into this teaching way back, a long time, before some of you were even born, I was reading a particular passage in our text called The Signs of Mind. And the passage was, does the thing I wish to do express more life, more happiness, more peace for myself, and at the same time harm no one? If it does, it is right. It is not selfish. Well, I read that and I felt like I had just been given the greatest gift in the world. Because this is how I have always lived my life. I called my mother and said, I've been doing it right all these years. Now, of course, now when I read when I read that passage in the beginning, it was from a place of frankly spiritual immaturity. Thinking that it basically gave me permission to do whatever I wanted, consequences be damned. No wonder I fell in love with this teaching, right? This is like, yay! I even want to be that gal, yay! But what I understand now is that this is not just permission to do anything, anytime, anywhere with no consequences, but it's a way to teach us about how to express our unique selves as fully as possible. To be happy and to be healthy and to be prosperous and to live in peace to the best of our abilities without harming anyone. Who can fault that, right? Who can fault that? But what I have also learned in these 30 years of being in this teaching is that as important as it is to live fully, it is equally as important to be a contributing, generous, growing, evolving giver to life. That contrary to what some people think, myself included when I was back spiritually immature, this is not a take philosophy. We used to be known as the religion of the princes, Porsches, and palaces. And parking spaces. Seriously, it was all in the 80s. Some of you guys remember this. In the 80s, it was all about finding the guy, getting the cool house, and the red sports car. So we're not like that anymore. We are not take anymore. This is a give and take philosophy. And sometimes it's necessary to sacrifice something that we hold dear in order to make room for something greater. And whether that sacrifice includes something as simple as sacrificing a piece of cake because you want to drop a couple of pounds, or sacrificing an extra hour of sleep so that you can go to the gym and feel a little healthier, or sacrificing your first cup of coffee in the morning because you got to take your dog out for her morning experience, or a baseball player who gives up on getting a home run so he can hit a sacrifice fly so that his teammate can score. Some sacrifices we're talking about, but those are the small ones. What about those greater ones? And you parents know what I'm talking about. Sacrificing your comfort so you can help someone. So you can help your kid. You can help, many of us have aging parents, help your aging parents. So you can be in service with someone. Or giving your life in the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. Last week in the States, they celebrated or observed Memorial Day for people who gave their lives in service to the country. And here in Canada, we do that on Remembrance Day, those ultimate sacrifices. So when we understand what real sacrifice means, which is basically giving up something lesser for something greater, it goes from being something that we dread, like I used to something that we consciously practice as spiritually mature people. Because when we sacrifice as spiritually mature people, when we take sacrifice and turn it into a spiritual practice, it deepens us. And it leads us into a greater understanding of how we can be in the world, how we're showing up in the world. Is this making sense? Yeah. I found this great quote. It was attributed to 3 different guys, so I went with the one that was mentioned the most often, Charles Dubose. It said, the important thing is this, to be able at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. Whoo! Love this quote. So let me tell you where this all came from. Because I don't often talk about sacrifice, as I said. So we had a practitioner meeting last Wednesday after service. You know, our practitioners sacrifice a lot. We sacrifice our time, we sacrifice our energy. They gave up a whole Sunday afternoon to come together as a group. So we're coming together as a group the second time, because we had met a couple of months ago as well, and we were having a group facilitated by Laura Lagendijk, who is our former board president. And Laura had each one of us draw a card from the Virtues Project deck, you know, the deck of cards. And the idea was to kind of get a word, to kind of get a card that would take us into our discussion, right? And there were many choices for different cards. There was peacefulness and mindfulness and grace and independence. And the card I drew, yeah, you guessed it, was sacrifice. Absolutely. There are no coincidences in life. So I'm not going to have you read this. It's actually pretty cool, because I want to tell you what I gleaned from it, what I learned from it. And that is that the root word of sacrifice is sakra, which means sacred, and facere, which means to make. So literally the word sacrifice means to make sacred. Did you know that? Is that cool? You bet it's cool. So now, of course, for many thousands of years, we had sacrifices, like sacrificing animals, or sacrificing people, or surrendering a possession or an honoring to God or to a divine and supernatural force. You know, all these kinds of things. In other words, to offer up something to the god or the gods to make them happy. So, of course, we don't do that anymore, okay? But if you really think about it, there is something sacred about giving up something we value to make room for something greater to be known. So I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute, because I kind of got fired up on this subject. Once I got going, I kind of got fired up, because I think it's really important for me to explain, because we have a couple of new people here, to explain what it is that I mean. When I am talking about God, I am not talking about the Old Testament God with the flowing white beard and the flowing white robe, who insisted that Abraham sacrifice his firstborn son in order to show his devotion to God. That's not the guy I'm talking about. Nor am I talking about the somewhat more benevolent God of the New Testament, who still required that his son give his life for all of mankind. So that's not the God I'm talking about also, because that God, oh, I'm going to get struck down. That God is a figment of man's imagination. In order to invent a deity that they could understand with their limited experience in the world. Have you noticed that both of those guys look like Moses or Abraham or Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments? Right? So this is not the God that I'm talking about when I'm referring to God. I'm talking about that life force energy that lives us, that moves and animates us. I'm talking about that which breathes us. Breathe it in. I'm talking about that life force energy that does that through us and as us, that creative mind that is always seeking to express itself more and more. And that God does not require a life sacrifice. In fact, it doesn't require anything. It simply responds to the act of releasing something lesser so that it can express itself more fully in a greater way. So that we let it go, we make room. Emerson says that nature abhors a vacuum. We let go of something, we sacrifice something to make something greater come in. So the good news is, this is really good news, is that by expressing itself in this greater way, we receive the benefit from it. That makes sense? We have a greater life experience, or we get a realization of a goal or desire when we open ourselves up and allow that to express itself through us. As we talked a couple of weeks ago, sometimes the sacrifice is part of becoming who we need to be in order to have the thing that we desire. I'm going to say that again because that was actually really profound. Sometimes the sacrifice is part of becoming who we need to be in order to have the thing that we desire. To let go of that which doesn't serve anymore, to allow that which will. So if we're not able to release the lesser, we can't make room for the greater. Not because God requires it, but because of who we become as the result of it. So one of the other reasons that I wanted to talk about sacrifice today, not only did the universe works in really mysterious ways. I had already been thinking about sacrifice. I drew that card last week. And also, it's because this is the week that started the sacred Islamic observance of Ramadan. Began earlier last week. Because if we say that we honor all religions, it means that we honor all faith traditions, all of them. Not just the cool ones like Buddhism, or Hinduism, or Native, or religious science. It means all of them. It means even the ones we don't understand, and the ones that we're scared of, and the ones that we've made assumptions about. Because the fact is there are over 2 billion Muslims in this world. And this is their sacred time. This is their sacred time. So I'm going to give you a very brief explanation about Ramadan and see if you could adhere to these practices. It's a full month of fasting, introspection, and prayer. Because in their tradition, it is one of the 5 of the fundamental principles of Islam. So each day during Ramadan, during that month, Muslims do not eat or drink from sunrise to sunset. Think about that in June. It's one thing in December. They only have to fast for like 5 hours. But think about that in June. From sunrise to sunset, they do not eat or drink. They're also supposed to avoid impure thoughts and bad behavior. Think about that any time of the year. And what happens is once the sun goes down, then they have a small meal before they go to bed, and then they wake up and they start all over again in the morning. Now seriously, how many of us could do that every day, all day, for a month, year after year after year? Sacrifice. Here's what else they do. They use the month to reevaluate their lives. They make peace with the people who they feel have wronged them. They make amends to those that they may have wronged. They endeavor to do away with all of their bad habits. Essentially, what they are doing is striving to clean up their lives and their thoughts and their feelings. In other words, for that month, they commit to sacrificing lower base ways of living and thinking in order to raise themselves up to a higher, purer way of being. So, again, because there are no accidents, there was a video on Facebook this week that talked about Ramadan since it was coming up. So I thought it would be nice for us to watch that video. It's just a couple minutes long. So, Ron, or dude.
Muslims are fasting from sunup to sundown. For those of us who work 9 to 5 on an empty stomach and without caffeine, our life becomes a literal hunger game. The first thing you notice is that your coworkers tend to ask you the same questions a lot.
So you're fasting. That means you can't eat, right?
Yep.
What? All?
That's what a fast is.
Not even water?
That's right.
Hey, so I hear you're fasting. That means you can't eat, right?
Happy birthday to you.
And those already awkward office birthday parties just get even more uncomfortable.
Cake?
Thanks, I'm fasting.
Oh, that must be great for getting in shape.
Actually, a lot of us gain weight, the midnight binge eating. It's complicated.
Jeez, what's the point even?
And there's always your one friend who's determined to find a loophole.
What if you cover all the windows with garbage bags so no sunlight gets in? Then you can eat.
As long as the sun is in the sky, we gotta fast.
I got it. What if you eat whatever you want and then afterwards you just make yourself throw up?
Look, dude, I could eat a sandwich right now. The whole point is that I'm choosing not to.
I'm sorry. I just missed getting lunch too.
I know. But in the end, it's all worth it. Ramadan's a time to control one's desires and get closer to God. The self-discipline that we learn carries on into other areas of our lives, so we can be better family members, friends, and yes, co-workers. And then I get to troll them on their parties. Hey, I'm gonna have some friends over on Saturday. Wanna come?
You know I don't drive on the Sabbath.
But what if you drove there and then you drove home in reverse? Would they cancel each other out?
So the good news is, when all of that is over, after the month of Ramadan, they have a giant party, they have feasts, they give each other presents, and they visit with friends and family. It sounds a lot like another Abrahamic holy day that involves a type of fasting called Lent, and a sort of a sacrifice meant to save us and absolve us from wrongdoing. And then they have a party where they visit with family and uncover Easter egg. Oh, did I? Maybe we're not so different after all. So now we come to the reason why I felt it was important to learn this lesson today. Because the truth is, we make sacrifices every single day. Sometimes they're unconscious. We don't even know that we are doing them. It's just how we get along in the world. Maybe you let somebody in on the road in front of you, even though you're in a hurry. Or you help a coworker or a friend, even though it interferes with your schedule. Or you give up your favorite TV show because your kid needs some attention. Or you skip French fries at lunch because you're eating with a friend who's trying to release some weight. Or maybe you do service work even though, oh man, you would so much rather just go home and veg. But each time we do it, even if we're doing it unconsciously, we're making room for something greater to be known. So now I ask you, what if we chose sacrifice as a spiritual practice? And no, I don't mean fasting for 30 days. But what if we chose to sacrifice on purpose in order to open ourselves up to a greater idea, to greater activity? What if we chose sacrifice simply to allow more of God to be realized through us and as us? What if we made a conscious effort every day to let go of something that no longer served us, a lesser thing, to allow a greater thing to be known? I found this great graphic in my research this week. Sacrifice, the act of giving up something valued for the sake of something else regarded as more important or worthy. And then the commentary is, it's worth it. So are you game? Are you game? Yeah? You're going to do the spiritual practice of sacrifice of somewhere? I'm game to do it if you are. And I'll tell you what mine is. After I come back from vacation, I vow to sacrifice 1/2 hour less of perusing Facebook in the morning, which I love, in order to go to the gym and work out. And yes, you can hold me accountable. But that means then I get to hold you accountable as well. I love you, and so it is.